Alright, so I know you guys have been wondering what I've been up to in this Roottrees game for the past few days or whatever. And let me tell you, I was learning a lot about the Roottrees. I'm gonna show you guys how the game works, and then we're just gonna jump into the completed family tree. So,
The plane
spoilers
that
for the
crashed last
Roottrees
night just
ahead.
outside of Pittsburgh is now known to have been the private jet of the Roottrees Corporation. Local aviation authorities have speculated, based on the pilot's final communication, that the winter storm and heavy winds played a significant role in the crash. On board were multiple family members, including corporate president Carl Roottrees and his
Rest in
daughters,
peace.
the Roottrees sisters, best known for their fashion lines and modeling careers. There were no survivors. Again, for those of you just joining us, the Roottrees are dead.
Alright. So basically, you get tasked with putting together a bunch of Roottrees people. And you gotta do it. You gotta fill in their pictures, you gotta fill in their names, and you gotta fill in the jobs that they had. And you also, for some of them, have to fill in their spouses, although it's a bit of like an optional uh, side challenge if you want to like be like a full completionist. Now the way you get pictures of people is you get evidence, and it's got like a description, like a bunch of photos, and you kind of just go and like click on their faces, and then you get like photos that you can throw into their into the family tree. All right. But yeah. Uh, so then yeah, you kind of slot these people in like so, and then you fill in what they're doing, and maybe like sometimes get something wrong, so then you like swap things around a little, and maybe you do like a little internet search, and you gotta like connect to the internet to figure out what's going on. And then once you connect to the internet, you can do like a little internet search, some information about stuff, and get your ears pierced like Rose. Rose isn't like a real name, it's like a fake name. Um, okay, yeah, right. And then you like figure out some details, and um, and maybe do a little swapperoo. Uh, hmm. Hmm. Very curious. This is a middle child like me. Tree. There we go. Alright, Alright, so once you fill in like 3 people correctly, it'll like lock them into the family tree. So in that sense, you can't really like uh, it's a bit harder to choose things, but you can still choose things. Alright. Alright, and then you get shown the full extent of the family tree that you've got to figure out. Wow. And it's pretty large. You've got 50 people in total to figure out, including this top secret envelope that you get to open once you fill in the whole family tree. And yeah, you gotta figure all this stuff out using your trusty search engine, some evidence, and you start with like a list of like notable root trees that are easy to find online. And oh, you also get like a like a full list of all the names possible. It's a long list of names, about 50 of them. So then and yeah, you get to jump into figuring out the whole root tree family tree. Right. So now let's talk about the fully completed root tree family tree. Whoa. Alright. Now you see, it all starts with the Roottrees Candy Company, which was founded in 1908 by Gwyneth Anderson, now known as Gwyneth Roottrees, and Elias Roottrees. This dapper young gentleman here and this lovely lady. And look at that other photo of Elias. Oh my gosh. This is a photo from a Business Watch magazine published in like 1936. Yeah, that's right. 1936, Watchman of the Year in his coat. You see, I found this by going online and doing a little spider search for like Elias Roottrees and getting some information about him, and he was voted Watchman of the Year, and you're like, what the heck is Watchman of the Year? You do a search for Watchman of the Year, and you get Business Watch magazine, and you're like, what's a Business Watch? Yeah, it's just the same thing, and then it gets added to your periodicals. You can search for like Elias Roottrees in your periodicals, and then you got like a scan of like the magazine, and then you find out that there's like this Carl Roottrees guy that was also like Watchman of the Year, and so you get a magazine cover and interview of like him too. Carl Roottrees grabs life by the roots, you see, and he's like a dapper young gentleman. He's actually the dad guy of those 3 sisters we filled in earlier. See, those are the 3 sisters, and and there's Carl Roottrees. And he was the president of the company when he died. So he, his job was president, then you fill that guy in. But enough about Carl Roottrees. We gotta go back to the beginning, go back to our roots, the Roottrees Candy Company, and Gwyneth Roottrees and Elias Roottrees. Let's see. So then there's like the first layer of the tree. It's like this first like top layer of people, and it's like, how the heck am I gonna figure out who these people are? And the way you do it is it's through this lovely lady here, Lauren Roottrees. See, Lauren, she wrote a book. She wrote a book. She wrote a book. And you find out about a life between wars. And you search for a life between wars. And eventually it gets added to your to your, you can like search for it on the public library, and Life Between Wars, and you get the book added to your thing, and the book comes with like a bunch of interviews and photos and evidence, and through this book you also get like a photo of the what are called the five pieces, and the five pieces, they're like the first generation of Roottrees. And so you go through and you click on faces, and while you're doing so, you like click on this guy here, and there's like a sixth guy in the background, and you're like, who's that guy? And you don't find out for quite a while. Now you see you've taken a photo of the five pieces. It's kind of like, who are the five pieces? Well, you read up the interview of like with Lauren in her book, her family history book that she wrote, called A Life Between Wars. And it turns out the five pieces, they're basically like the first generation of kids from Elias Roottree. This guy, Elias Roottree, the original president of the Roottrees Candy Company. Now you see, so you go through and you like slot in their photos, and sadly for a lot of the women, you can kind of just slot in housewife as the occupation, and in most cases you'll basically be correct. It was the early 1900s, I suppose, or something. I don't know my history all that well, but maybe I don't know. And so yeah, you kind of like, you get their photos through that, and then through the interviews with Lauren, you can sort of figure out what their jobs were and such. And Aunt Margot, this is, so you look through and you're like, who's Margot? And you find out there's a Margolite Roottree, and so you slot her in, and she got married to Linus Cornwall, who was a I don't know much about Linus. I read about him in some search or something. But they had a kid. Her name was Gwen Roottree, and Lauren says she was like a terrible influence, not very present. But she was an actor, and because she's an actor, you can find out a lot about her through the periodical Silver Screen magazine focused on the business of old Hollywood. So you search for Gwen Roottree, and there's not much, huh? Oh, right, Starlet has the gossip. Right, yeah, so Starlet, you search better in Starlet, and you find out about Wild Bill Williams. And Wild Bill Williams, he's he's a pretty wild guy that does a bunch of crazy stuff. And you're like, well, okay, maybe I can find out more about Wild Bill Williams. Because it turns out that Wild Bill Williams is actually like a fake name. You have to put in his real name, which is Walter Forsythe. And so through that, you get to know that Gwen Roottree was married to Walter Forsythe. And here's another photo of Gwen Roottree from this like other photo that you get of her and her kids. Because you got like this widely circulated photo. But then through some evidence that you got like just given to you by your client, you get this where is it? Where's the photo? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so then you get this photo of, Gwen and the boys from Paris, and you're like, wow, the boys, huh? Those must be her two kids. And, then you slot those photos in, you're like, because you see that she had two kids with Walter Forsythe, aka Wild Bill Williams, with whom she was later divorced, a messy divorce, because Wild Bill Williams was a bit of a wild guy. And you slot the photos in, but you need to figure out their names, and you find out that Ronald Roottree was a director, and he had like two kids. So you know that he's the one that's got two kids, whereas this poor guy is the guy that's got no kids. By the way, they don't go by Ronald Roottree or Robert Roottree in any of the material you find out about them online. They go by Ron Roottree and Robbie Roottree. And you find out they're Gwen's kids because through an interview, I think it was with Lauren Roottree, you know that she's going to name her kid something with a lot of alliteration. So you know it's going to be, you know, something that's like got alliteration in it. Hence Ronald Roottree and Robert Roottree. They're the only names that have alliteration for the Roottree family. Um, so yeah, you kind of you throw those guys in. That's sort of how you get their names, and the jobs come from they like run a company called RR Productions, and RR Productions has a bunch of rumors going on about near like rumors. Well, maybe like Starlit magazine would have like something to do about it, or maybe Silver Screen magazine. And so you find out that Robbie Roottree was like tried under the name Robert in a French court of law, and you know he's like got like a gambling thing and whatnot, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of drama. It's a big lot of drama going on, and you know, but enough about them. So you know, there's Clancy Edward Roottree. He's Lauren's dad, and she talks about her dad. She calls him Pop and a bunch of stuff, and mentions that she once got mailed for an Edward Clancy Roottree, and she is like, "Oh man, these silly people mixing up the names on the mail and sending mail for Clancy Edward Roottree under the name Edward Clancy Roottree, and yeah." Yeah, that was her pop, and her pop was a lawyer. You find that out because in one of Lauren's interviews, this is Lauren again, by the way. By the way, her husband Rafferty, Jacob Rafferty, he died in the war, so it was tragic, a real tragedy, really. They had a kid, Clark Rafferty, but we'll get into Clark later, anyways. Yeah, Jacob Rafferty. Oh, right, her dad, Clancy Edward Roottree, and her mom, her mother family, the Cossells. You see, she doesn't really talk much about the Cossells. It says in your evidence for like a life between wars, or yeah, her mother's family was called the Cossells, but she hardly ever mentions them. There's only one Cossell in your list of names, so you can like slot a Sarah Cossell in there as the spouse of her pop, Clancy Edward Roottree, who once got mail for him under the name Edward Clancy Roottree. And the reason I keep mentioning that is because it turns out at the very end of the game that what? There was a secret six kid that was hidden from existence named Edward Clancy Roottree. And you have to like type in his name manually as well as the name of his spouse. You have to type them in exactly or they get counted as wrong and you feel sad and bad about yourself when you click I'm ready and the game tells you only got it partially correct, even though you got it fully correct. But yeah, the reason Edward Clancy Roottree was hidden from existence was because he had a gay spouse. He was using a gay relationship, and it was a different time, I suppose, or something. And his family was scumbags. They're all scum. All of these five pieces guys. They're all just pure scum. Especially this guy, Miracle Roottree. This guy's a real scumbag. I mean, look at that face. But we'll get into him later. You know. But yeah, they tried to erase this guy from existence. They went so far to erase him from existence that in their candy line, you see, it's the Roottree Candy Corporation. We got to go back to the candy. I mean, we haven't even talked about the candy that they're making at all yet, or the farm. Oh my gosh, we haven't even talked about the farm. You see, the candy five pieces. Now, this was a candy line. Oh, this is like the modern version of the candy line. They've like reinvented it now in the 1990s to try and get people interested in five pieces again. But the flavors, this is all like a red herring. It has nothing. There's nothing interesting to glean from the flavors. In fact, this poster is kind of just useless and hanging out in your evidence and taking up space. It's really annoying. But you see, what you see is the 5 pieces. This is a poster you can come across pretty early, and it talks about how like all the flavors are like named after like the kids. You got like GECEM and another M for Miracle Berry. It's like, whoa, I guess Miracle is the 5th kid, and it's and the flavors, they're like ordered in the same order as the kids. So you got like what, G, E, again, ignoring EC because he was erased from existence, sadly. CE and M and M again, Miracle, and the other M, Margalite. And so you use that to figure out the order of these names and slot them in. And the for the photos, you kind of go off the fact that Gwen you find pretty early on. You know that she's got a divorce and she got 2 kids and she's got blonde hair and her mom has blonde hair that she inherited it from or something. I don't know. It's sort of just how it works all the time in this game. Hair is very important for figuring out who's related to whom. So you can figure out that her photo, the blonde, she's got blonde hair, and so you slot her in as the mom of Gwen, and then you put in housewife, and sadly that's correct. Yeah. Anyways, I think that about does it for the original 6 children. Again, big plot twist. There's a 6th child. You still have to like figure it out at the end of the game by like reading between the lines and stuff, and reading interviews about Lauren about this mysterious EC person that she keeps mentioning, whose name she was never fully told. And also, if you like, when you find this poster, it's like The Sweet History of Candy Volume 2 by Charles Lee. And if you like, you're like, Volume 2, well, I wonder what they wrote about in Volume 1. And you go into your public library and you're like, Charles Lee, The Sweet History of Candy Volume 1. Then you get this poster that was removed because of a quote-unquote major misprint. And then you get this thing, and it doesn't mention Miracle at all. It mentions EC for egg cream. And you're like, what? Who? What is that? Where did EC come from? And you realize that EC was a hidden away child that they used to have, or that they still have, but are just pretending doesn't exist. Yeah, the reason erasing people from history is pretty important to this family, or it's something they try to do pretty frequently but fail to do because of this thing called the Clancid Trust. And the Clancid Trust, it's this thing where basically a fixed percentage of its profits are split every quarter amongst bank accounts representing each direct relative of Elias and Gwyneth. So an account is created for each blood relative at birth and first successful when they reach 18. And that ends up being a lot of money because this candy sold like crazy. I mean, this candy was jumping off the shelves, I'll tell you. Yeah, it was really quite something, the candy. All right, now where to begin with the rest of the family? Well, you know, we already talked about the sisters, and oh right, now Raina, she's married to Thomas Sheridan. The way you find that out is through this poster, or this interview in Teen Blast magazine with Raina. It's got like a little quote at a TMS. What's he up to? Team Blast can tell you. And you're like, TMS? Who's TMS? And you search for TMS and you find out about Tommy Mark Sheridan, and he had a relationship with Raina Roottrees. You're like, cool. That's neat, I guess. And he was involved in the production of Brother Trouble. And Brother Trouble is the show that was run by RR Productions, which I'm sure you all remember was the production company started by Robert Rootree and Ronald Rootree, Ron Rootree, and his screenwriter, who was the director. That's how you find out his job. Small screen director Ron Rootree, and then you find out that Robbie Rootree, aka Robert Rootree, was the screenwriter, and that's how you learn what these guys, what their jobs were and stuff. And yeah. Yeah. Alright, so then we have Miracle. We have Miracle Roottrees. Now you see Miracle Roottrees. The reason he's called this is because, and yeah, let's just go back to his face. Just get that face in your memory one more time. Now you see Miracle Roottrees. He was called that because of apparently it's because they thought he was impossible like he arrived so late in his mother's life. He was birthed so late, younger than his brothers and sisters by over 14 years. And this is actually, this 14 years number, I mean, this is pretty important. It ends up being part of how you discover that a child was hidden from existence at the end of the game. Sort of something you sort of have to like piece together yourself. You see, the way you do it is because you go back to this Business Watch magazine. I mean, it all starts with this Business Watch magazine, 1936, Watchman of the Year. Now, you see that in 1909, Elias had a daughter, the first of 5 children. 4 more follow, leading to 1922. How many years is that? 1922 minus 1909. Let's click them in this order. That's 13. But then you go back to the search that you did for Miracle Roottrees, and you see that it was over 14 years, but there were already 5 children by the time that Miracle was born. So then, what? How there are... Who is the 6th child? Who is the 6th child? And that is another clue that there was a 6th hidden child. I guess technically the 3rd child was hidden, and then Miracle was the 6th child, if you want to be precise. Where were we? Right, Miracle Roottrees. You see, Miracle Roottrees. He's part of this thing called the Miracle Network, and they're spreading the word of God through the population. The power of the Lord coming to a town near you. And you get a blurb, you got a flyer for the Miracle Network. You get a flyer. Yeah, you get a flyer. I got a flyer about this apparently somewhere in this. This is there's a flyer somewhere. They're telling me I got a flyer. Oh yeah. Yes. Witness the power of the Lord in the Summer 96 Free Generations of Miracles tour, featuring testimony from world famous Miracle Jr., this guy, and a special appearance from Miracle Roottrees in his 68th year on God's Earth. And you find Miracle Third and his wife Nicole. And that's how you fill in quite a bit of the Miracle tree. And by the way, the kids are all ordered in order from oldest to youngest. So that's how you know Miracle goes at the far right side of things. Because he was a miracle child that was birthed super late. So then you slot in Miracle Jr., and then you slot in Miracle Third and his wife Nicole, who are also part of the preacher. And you know they're all preachers because they're all part of this Miracle Network. You might see that I have quite a few photos of Miracle Jr. Throughout the ages here. I mean, here he is with his dad at a young age, sort of sitting there. And here's Miracle with the shades on. And then you also get there's like a family reunion photo that they do once every 20 or so years. And here's this big family reunion photo, and you gotta figure out who all these people are, and it's a huge pain in the ass to figure out who any of these people are, but you do see an Eli here, and there's got a name tag saying Eli, and you look up like who's Eli, and you find that there's a guy named Elias M. Rootree. The M is for miracle, I believe. But it's confusing because there's two Eliases. There was also Elias C. Rootree, who was uh, Lauren Roottrees' brother. She makes a note about the fact that and all these people are usually called Eli commonly, at least in Lauren's books. So she makes a note in this 10-year later revisiting the diary thing that she wrote, and you find out this book even exists because you search for a republication of a book that she wrote called X Marks the Spot, and this was a redo she did of a romance book that she wrote, and then it says, keep an eye out for Lauren Roottree's next book, Revisiting the Diary, 10 years later. And you type in Revisiting the Diary 10 years later. And you you find this retrospective book, and in the retrospective book she mentions she has like a note about names, and there are 4 Eli's for Pete's sake. I mean, that's a lot of Eli's, and she's like my brother, my uncle, my cousin. So then she gives them these nicknames like Miracles Eli or Eli C. And yeah, it's sort of how you end up figuring out eventually that Eli C is her brother, which means the other Eli, the one that's got the tag saying Eli in here, must be Eli M. And I honestly forgot. I think I just did it by the hair. I did a lot of things by the hair in this game. He just kind of looked similar to Miracle Junior Roottree, so I put him in, and kind of was wearing an outfit that made him look like a mechanic, so I threw in mechanic as the job, and I think the game was like, yep, you got that right, because I had 2 other people that I had right. And with Catherine Wilkins, you see Catherine Wilkins. Well, eventually you find this flyer for Roottrees Mortars, and you find out that Wilkins Mortars is now Roottrees Motors. I'm not saying I'm saying mortars, but I mean motors. And they're the local family mechanic, and you find this photo of Tessa Roottrees. And she learned all there is to know about cars from her Roottrees Motors parents. And so through that, you figure out that Wilkins must be the spouse of the mechanic in the family, and you throw Tessa Roottrees in as their kid. And there you go. You got the whole Miracle branch all figured out, all plumb and settled. And that's a lot of people, huh? All right. So then, you figure out that Gwendolyn was the firstborn kid. She had 2 kids. Angie, Lauren calls her. Not Samantha. We'll get to Samantha later. Lauren calls Angelica Angie, and mentions that Angie was actually like the oldest kid of the first. The oldest kid. She's the firstborn child of the firstborn child of Elias Roottrees. So you can figure out for that Angie, aka Angelica Morden, was the oldest kid, and that she's going to go on the far left of the family tree on this generation. Speaking of generations, holy crap, we haven't even talked about the fact that this generation, it's called the next generation. And so you can sort of figure out that everybody in this photo, with a few exceptions that Lauren calls out here, was part of the next generation. You're trying to fit them all into like this layer of the family tree here. This sort of yeah, and yeah, that gives you most of the photos of, like people, including second president Zach Morden, um, who stepped down from presidency, having done a pretty good job, and handed it over to Guy Hudson, although it was actually supposed to go to Edward Clancy Roottrees, but he got relegated into being a farmhand on account of his marriage to John Miller. Real tragedy. Um, yes, they gave it over to Guy Hudson. You look up about Guy Hudson, you find out that he died in a car crash with his wife Patricia, and they had no kids, so you know he's the one that has no kids. And you know that there's Hudson's. You know he had a sister Bonnie, and you know that they are these red-haired people, lovely little people, because when you're looking up when you're looking up information about Guy Hudson, you find out that there was like an advertising campaign that was going on, and also that they inherited their red hair from their parents. And so you know that Angelica's the one with red hair, and Guy Hudson and Bonnie Hudson also have red hair. And you throw in their child photos there for good measure, for like bonus points, I guess. And oh yeah, there's another Gwendolyn there too. Wait, isn't that crazy? You find out about Steven Wilson. You see this guy, Steven Wilson, through I think he did like some legal work or something for the three sisters here. Yeah, these three sisters. I think he did like some work related to them. He was in some sort of legal related helping thing with them. And you look up information about him, and he sounds kind of crazy. And you get this like photo of his kids, and you know he's yeah Steven Wilson's kids. And you kind of figure out which of the kids is which based on like a little quote, some fake quotes from this Jason guy, and you see this guy's got a hat, so you know he's probably in college now, and you just sort of guess these two are in like K to 12, and you're right, and then it's all done. And then you got like this little area filled out nicely, and Caroline Morden, she's upset over the fact that all of her her sister and like her cousins and stuff, they all were basically housewives. I guess. I think she like specifically calls out like Gwendolyn and Bonnie for being housewives instead of like doing something or whatnot. Not there's any, I don't know. Anyways, yeah. So you figure out that they're housewives. And you figure out that Caroline, she's an artist, and whew, speaking of Caroline, you get this political flyer from Stephanie Jones, born or nay Stephanie Landon, and you sort of figure out from that that Mark Landon was Caroline's husband. And you get this political flyer, and where is it? Let me see. You get this political flyer here for vote for Stephanie Jones for city council, better for Butler County. And you're told this like political flyer is like pretty important, and you're not quite sure why. I mean, there's like this sort of foreboding quote about don't let our conflicts spread to the next generation, and you're like, maybe that's why it's important. But actually, no. The reason that it ends up being super important is that well, like you try to find information about Stephanie Jones, and it's like, go read the article in like the Butler County Times. And it's like, okay, fine, I'll go find out about Stephanie Jones in the Butler County Times. And right, Caroline's a local artist, and that's how you find out that Caroline's an artist, and also that Caroline is Stephanie's mom. And also, mother and her partner essentially have an entirely female influence. That's how you end up figuring out that Caroline got remarried to a lady instead of a guy, which helps you like slot in the information there. And you find out about Brian Jones, and through Brian Jones, right, you have to search for him in the local times instead of just the web. You find out about Jones Graphic and Print, and this is why the political flyer is the campaign flyer is actually super important. It's because when you go and you look into Jones Graphic and Print, it turns out they've done flyers for basically everything. They've done posters, flyers, mailers, banners for basically everything. And through this, like you find so much information, you find so much evidence that lets you figure out things about people and here, yeah, you get some flyers or something through that, I think. Somewhere. But yeah, so then, let's see, anything else to cover here? I mean, I forgot how I figured out that, well, I knew that Zach Morden was the second president. I knew that he was Angelica Morden's brother, Angie Morden. So then I sort of kept following the Mordens down, but then, um, it's important to kind of use like the fact that uh, the women always take the men's last name in this game, with very few exceptions, um, to sort of understand um, names and stuff and where people might be. Like the fact that she got married to Wilson means that her kids' names are Wilson instead of Morden. Um, you sort of use that to figure out a lot of numbers of kids and stuff, where people need to be going and stuff. All right, now Lauren, who wrote the diaries and stuff, A Life Between Wars and Revisiting the Diary 10 years later or whatever. She had a kid named Clark that she talks about quite a bit in both her diaries. Um, and Clark, she's like ashamed of him because, well, one, he gets married to Danielle at a super young age, 16, and she's like, that's way too young, that's not going to work out. And sure enough, it doesn't. And she says, oh, he's only marrying Jane because she's part of this band that he's in, Jane LaRue. And Jane LaRue is part of this. You search up more about LaRue, and you find out that Clark Rafferty, Lauren's kid, and Jim Roottrees were in like a band together, and they were in a band with the LaRue sisters, C and J plus J and D. J and D is Diamond LaRue and Jane LaRue, while C and J are Clark Rafferty and Jim Roottrees, or James Roottrees, I think was his birth name. Yeah, then he named himself Jim Roottrees. Um, and through Jim Roottrees, you find out about Diamond LaRue, and you get this disco song, rolling on down to the city. And maybe I'll just sort of, let me just boost that a little for you guys so you can hear that a bit more nicely. And then while you're looking up more about Jim Roottrees, you find this like little Christmas card, and it says Son Wolf listening to his parents' latest music. And you know that his parents are still together, and you know that he's probably a K-12 student because he's young. And Candy Roottrees is actually pretty hard to figure out that she's in here, because you find out about her through you're looking up some more information about music, and eventually you run into the Floozies, the what are they called? What are these people called? The Floozies. That's them. And you search up information about the Floozies, and you find that she's very cagey about identities, rumored to be the children of other famous musicians. Yeah, so that's how you find out about Candy, and that she's a musician. But as for why I like threw her in here, I don't know. She's a musician. Her dad's a musician. It just seemed to work, and it did work. I quit her job as a musician. Alright, now Clark Rafferty, to try and keep the band together, the band, right, the band that wrote These Times, let me turn that down slightly. Now, he got into a relationship with Jane LaRue, and Jane LaRue, the sister of Diamond LaRue, who's still married to James Roottree, who now goes by Jim Roottree. They got into a relationship together to try and keep the band together, but it didn't really work out. But they did have a kid together, and it's Chris Rafferty. And you find out about Chris because he writes an angry email to some guy trying to get him to take down some fake information about Clark Rafferty, his dad. And through that, you end up finding out that you get his email address, Chris Rafferty, and you find out that his email address is chrisraff75 at prodigy.us. You're like, what's Prodigy? And it's like an ISP that offers email services and web hosting. And people, not everyone with the service makes a website, but if they do, you can usually find it by searching for their screen name. So then you search up chrisraff75 as username, and you get this weird art piece that he did, as well as a painting with him and his misspelled fiance. It's intentional. It's like a joke. He's not I don't know. He's just a kid. Don't go too hard on him. You find out his fiance Lulu, and you get this painting. Painting that he did of him and his fiance, Lulu. And you're like, who's Lulu? And you look for Lou, and you find out Louisa. It's Louisa Garcia. And you slot them in, and college student. And he also did this crazy art piece, experimental collage art piece, where I can't show you it, but it basically, well, it begins in this messed up state like this, and you have to do a bunch of little mini games to like on this one you zoom in all these things to get them to the right zoom level, and this one you rotate them, and this one you slide a bunch of pieces around. This third one on the right, we have to slide. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, but you're sliding it by row and column, and it's sort of a pain in the ass to do to slide it by row and column. But eventually you got these completed photos as a result of Chris Rafferty's cousins. And through these cousins, you sort of you can figure out some of the remaining parts of the family tree, like the Kellogg's here, David and Bethany, and you know, from David Forth that he's David Third's kid, and I forget how I figured out that Kellogg was married to Bonnie. It might have been a interview or something, or maybe it was just the number of kids that were remaining at this point. And for Stephanie Cattrall, I honestly, it might have been process of elimination how I figured out her name. I don't think there were many names remaining at the point. She was one of the last four that I figured out. But in her photo, it says middle school in the background, so you figure out that she's a middle school kid. Um, I thought she was a college student for like the longest time, and that was really throwing me off. It was really hard to complete the last four because I had her dialed in wrong for like an hour, maybe even 2 or 3 hours. Um, yeah, Deborah and Nicole. Deborah was Ernie Jr.'s wife. Ernie was the last president before Carl, who died tragically in the plane crash. You get this like postcard delivered to you from your client that I think was like part of it was in Carl's office when Carl died. And the postcard, where's the postcard? Here we go. All right, so the postcard mentions it's from Deborah, and it mentions for Nicole's sake. So you end up figuring out that Debbie, like she's talking about Ernie, her husband, and you figure out through that Ernie was that Deborah was Ernie's wife, and that they have a kid, Nicole. So you can slot them in there. Um, yeah, I really don't remember how I figured out about Stephanie. I think it was just process of elimination. Um, and for Clark's remaining kids here, the LaRues, well, I knew that the relationship with Jane LaRue ended. It wasn't really out of love, it was just to try and keep the band together. Um, but for Kim LaRue, you end up finding out this ad campaign that Clark Rafferty did where he took like a family photo for an ad campaign for the Super Bowl. It was the inspiration for the famous Super Bowl ad Roottrees campaign or something. You get this family of four, and there's one LaRue remaining, and you know that there's a Rafferty LaRue, two Rafferty LaRue kids, so you can slot them in. And they mentioned that Katrina's the one that's looking kind of angry in the photo, and you first elimination that Jessica's the other one, and then you kind of swap around until you got the age order correct. And Tessa Green Penelope, she Ronald Roottrees' wife. How did I end up figuring out that they were in a relationship together? I think on Roottree. I think it was she appeared in Tessa Green. Tesla. Oh. Tessa dash Green. LP. Still around? Might have been in the locals. Oh, right, I was reading it backwards. Right. Yeah, you find out about her, and you get you get these pictures of her kids from finding out about her. And I think you find out about her because she worked with Ron Roottree on one of the productions they did together. It might have been Brother Trouble. I think it was Brother Trouble. I'm almost certain it was Brother Trouble. Their single mother, played by stand-up Penelope Tessa Green. Right. And that's how you figure out about them. And you see that she's part of the family tree, and you sort of figure out that maybe Ron Roottree and her got together, and they had some babies and stuff, and including Christina Roottree there. Right. One of the last kids I figured out was November Roottree. In this photo, you get the family reunion. Has a kid in it, November. You don't know her name's November, and on the back of the photo it says in childish print writing, it says November. And at first you think that's a date, but it turns out there's one of the names you can fill in as November. November Roottrees. And so you figure out that she's the child in the photo because it has the childish print writing. And you figure out that she's a dancer because somewhere in the way in the thing you find out. Oh right, it was through the Jones graphics and print. Jones graphics and print. Right, through the Jones graphics and print, you find out about the Butler Summer Theater, where it says choreography by November Studios, and you try to look up November Studios, and you find out it's a local dance school. You're like, huh, well, that's not much to go off of, but it does say November, and it says local dance school, so she's probably a dancer. And that was right. Raina mentions her granddad was a professor, too. That's how I knew he was a professor. Yeah. Wow. And that's all I think you need to know about the Roottrees.